The world barely had time to blink before Elon Musk struck again, this time in a way that sent tremors not just through Brussels, but across every capital in Europe. While Ursula von der Leyen and her cadre of regulators were drafting what they believed to be the ultimate framework to control online platforms, Musk executed a maneuver so audacious that it shattered their assumptions entirely. There were no press conferences, no formal statements, no careful leaks to the compliant media. In an instant, the digital landscape of Europe had been rewritten, and the Commission realized too late that their entire strategy was now obsolete. For decades, the European Union had prided itself on control, the power to regulate, to sanction, to censor. They believed that infrastructure was the ultimate weapon. Fiber networks, data centers, and mobile towers, all under the tight grasp of Brussels. Every law, every policy, every fine was predicated on the assumption that control over access meant control over influence. But Musk had found a loophole that could not exist, the sky itself. In a move that stunned even the most seasoned observers, Musk announced that Starlink would now integrate seamlessly with the social platform X, delivering high-speed internet directly to every European household willing to receive it. No intermediary ISPs, no EU-controlled infrastructure, no regulations that could touch the service. Every individual terminal, compact enough to fit on a balcony or in a backpack, suddenly became a gateway to a digital realm Brussels could neither ban nor tax. Musk didn't just innovate. He circumvented an entire continent's legal framework with precision, showing the world that sovereignty in the digital age was no longer defined by laws, but by reach. The timing could not have been more surgical. Mere days before the announcement, leaked internal EU documents revealed plans for an aggressive digital sovereignty initiative. The Commission had envisioned a mechanism that could cut off any platform from European networks with a single signature, an unstoppable weapon in their bureaucratic arsenal. Musk's action rendered that plan irrelevant. You cannot disconnect people from the internet when the infrastructure they rely on no longer exists in your jurisdiction. What Brussels had crafted as a sword, Musk turned into a relic inside the European Commission. Panic set in with a speed that was almost cinematic. Statements were carefully worded, vague, and strategically neutral. But the reality behind closed doors was chaos. Von der Leyen, once vocal in her condemnation of American tech giants, fell silent. Emergency meetings stretched late into the night. Legal teams scrambling to find any angle, any regulation that might even partially reclaim control. Every option ended in frustration. Satellites, after all, orbit outside national borders governed by international treaties that the EU could not rewrite overnight. Starlink terminals in private hands could not simply be confiscated without provoking mass protests or outright rebellion. The optics alone would have destroyed the Commission's credibility, even if enforcement were somehow possible. Musk's strategy was more than technological. It was psychological. By openly broadcasting his decisions to hundreds of millions of followers on X, he transformed what could have been a private corporate maneuver into a spectacle of transparency. Every legal threat, every regulatory threat, every internal EU communication became public knowledge within hours, dissected and analyzed by citizens, journalists, and tech insiders alike. The Commission's attempt to manage a narrative honed over decades through controlled media releases collapsed instantly. Musk had built a megaphone louder than any bureaucracy could compete with. The financial stakes became immediately apparent. European fines, even in the hundreds of millions of euros, were nothing compared to Musk's net worth, which fluctuates more in a single day than the EU's regulatory penalties could ever hope to impose. Beyond the symbolic victory, Musk had established a revenue stream entirely outside European control. Citizens accessing X through Starlink no longer depended on infrastructure subject to EU rules. Brussels had no way to regulate it, tax it, or shut it down, and the realization of this fact was sending shivers through European capitals. The political fallout spread like wildfire. EU member states began fracturing along lines of interest. Nations with emerging digital economies quietly distanced themselves from aggressive anti-X rhetoric, recognizing that Starlink could become a strategic advantage. Meanwhile, France and Germany pushed for maximalist enforcement, demanding the Commission reclaim authority, yet with no real strategy for doing so. Internal divisions deepened, public opinion shifted, And every day without action magnified the perception of institutional impotence. The genius of Musk's maneuver extended even further. By bypassing the EU's control mechanisms, he forced a moral and ideological reckoning. Brussels had long positioned itself as the champion of internet freedom, criticizing authoritarian regimes for their censorship, while touting the European model as a beacon of democratic governance. Now, any attempt to curb Starlink access would brand them as precisely what they had criticized: gatekeepers of information, imposing restrictions on citizens' digital freedoms. The hypocrisy was obvious, immediate, and viral, and social media users across Europe were quick to point out, fueling a wave of skepticism towards the Commission's authority. Economic consequences began to ripple outward. European startups and tech entrepreneurs, seeing the futility of competing under regulatory frameworks that could be bypassed by someone like Musk, quietly began relocating operations abroad. Investment in European tech slowed dramatically, with venture capital increasingly wary of entering a market where compliance could be rendered meaningless overnight. The Digital Services Act, designed to level the playing field, had inadvertently created a two-tier system where compliant companies face suffocating costs while insurgent competitors thrive beyond regulation. Musk's maneuver had revealed a fundamental truth. Without enforcement power, regulations are little more than theater, a costly performance that punishes the compliant while emboldening the defiant. The geopolitical implications were staggering. Authoritarian governments that relied on digital control now faced an existential challenge. China's Great Firewall, Russia's internet restrictions, and Iran's censorship apparatus suddenly seemed vulnerable. Starlink offered a route for uncensored information to reach citizens in ways previously unimaginable. Musk, intentionally or not, had created a foundation for a global information revolution. Governments that had invested billions to maintain control watched as one entrepreneur with orbital satellites undermined decades of strategy, redefining what it meant to exert power in the digital age. Meanwhile, Washington observed with cautious fascination Musk's actions were emblematic of American values: free speech, innovation, and defiance of regulatory overreach. Yet, they also set a precedent that no government could ignore: the rise of private actors with the ability to operate beyond legal jurisdiction. U.S. officials were forced into delicate diplomacy, praising innovation while avoiding direct confrontation with Brussels, all while grappling with the broader implications for U.S. regulatory authority. Within Brussels, frustration mounted daily. Proposals to ban Starlink terminals, restrict citizen access, or pressure member states collapsed under constitutional, logistical, and practical scrutiny. The EU's legal arsenal, once formidable, now seemed like a collection of empty threats against a force operating beyond terrestrial borders. Emergency sessions, intense briefings, and internal debates offered no solutions, only the growing realization that the Commission was fighting a battle it could not win. The implications for democracy, governance, and the future of digital infrastructure were becoming undeniable. Musk had not simply outmaneuvered an institution. He had exposed the limits of bureaucratic power in a hyper-connected world, forcing leaders, citizens, and policymakers to confront a reality where technology could instantly render traditional authority irrelevant. Every move he made created new challenges, new ethical dilemmas, and new fractures in European digital sovereignty, leaving the continent watching in stunned silence as a single individual reshaped the rules of power. As Europe struggled to process the shock, Musk shifted from defense to deliberate offense. His next announcements weren't merely technological. They were strategic provocations carefully designed to highlight every weakness in the European regulatory framework. Legal aid for any European citizen prosecuted for using Starlink to access X was suddenly on the table. A public dare aimed directly at van der Leyen and her advisors. Each potential court case became a spectacle, forcing judges to choose between upholding laws that would brand them authoritarian or striking down regulations that would expose Brussels as impotent. Musk made enforcement itself a trap, turning every bureaucratic tool into a potential public relations disaster. Inside the Commission, the atmosphere grew almost surreal. Senior officials who had spent decades mastering legislative maneuvers now found themselves powerless. Their expertise rendered irrelevant by orbital technology and a billionaire's audacity. Proposals for sanctions failed because satellites operate in space, not national airspace. Suggestions to ban individual terminals